Hey there, and welcome to my live stream. And this one is going to be a new one where I'm going to start a series about my experience as a design founder. And I want to share with you the failures, the successes, the techniques, the process, the team, the management, and of course, my story as a designer for the past 20 years. So, who am I? I'm Meng, and I'm the founder of Design Plus Code. So we're a platform that teaches design and code together to both designers and developers, and we try to do it holistically. So we have a platform with a lot of courses. We design everything from the ground up, including the app, the website, the courses. Nothing is relying on any other platform than ours. And we pride ourselves in the process of creating those things. So I spent a lot of time as a founder participating in the design process, the coding process, the management process, and yeah, I want to teach that. And I think that's not impossible for a founder to participate in the execution. I know a lot of founders out there, they spend a lot of time mostly on funding and management and vision. But if you're like me, who likes executing, who likes design, who likes to code, who likes to experiment, I think you're going to find this interesting. So we have three products. We have design code, we have shape, where we bring these resources. As you learn design code, we like to bring resources for illustrations and icons, as well as for mockups. So making it easy for you to present your ideas and to create beautiful presentations, whether it's on Keynote or for cover images on YouTube, Instagram, and Twitter. So these are our three products, and collectively we make about 1 million per year. And in the spirit of transparency, I'm going to show you where we are. So a total revenue over the past 6 years, we've made over 3 million. And in the last 1 year, we started doing 1 million USD. So we're really happy about that. So if you look at the past 12 months, design code alone has reached 672. And we have three products, shape and angle. So for the past 12 months, angle, for example, made 96. So if we tally everything using Solver, which is great for doing the calculations by having lines like this. So design code 670, angle 96, shape 50, and PayPal, because we also accept PayPal and the payments here are mostly on Stripe. So PayPal represents about 10 to 20% of the revenue. So we have a total of a little bit more than 1 million per year. And I want to share with you sort of like what it's like to run a company like this, a startup like this, how to strike the perfect balance between personal life and an office and working with employees, and the balance between design and code, the balance between being a founder and being someone who executes and participate in the development process. So we're going to cover all of this stuff. And yeah, the company has been growing for about 3 years. We have 14 people so far, 50% about designers, 50% developers. And it was not clear at first. In fact, we hire a lot of early designers and developers, which means they don't know what they really want to be, right? Like there's so many levels of crafting, such as UI, UX, product design, prototyping, and then you have coding, which is huge because you have different languages, different platforms, Swift UI, Swift, React, React Native, and then you have, all the other platforms. If you want to go for the web, if you want to go for, back end, front end, all of these things. So it's a big, big industry that we're in. And we have a mix of all of those things, and we experiment a lot as a team. and we give the freedom to everyone in the team to pick their passion, as long as they can show us that they're passionate about it and they're serious about, you know, putting that 10,000 hours or contributing to that 10,000 hours in order to master that craft. Of course, when you start, it's not easy. So this is why I'm going to start with my story as a designer. And, you know, if you have any question, feel free to ask the question. I'm going to try to keep track of it. And at the end of the stream, I'm going to answer your questions. As usual, if you like these streams, especially this new series about me being a founder and sharing my techniques, like this video so that I know this is going to be successful. If it's successful, then I'm going to create more videos about my life as a founder. But if it's not, I'm going to focus more on the design aspect or Swift UI or different other things. So subscribe, and we do this 3 p.m. every single week, and I hope you enjoy it. So let's go with the story. 18 years old. I basically was building a lot of websites. This was in the 2000 boom of the internet, and everyone wanted to create their own website. Everyone wanted to be a web designer, a developer, and I guess UI was not at the forefront. Most of us were graphic designers and doing abstract stuff or photography eventually. And a lot of us were using DeviantArt to post our work. Dribble was not there around that time. And, you know, I was 18. So I started as a graphic designer. And I remember the summer when I was supposed to go to college, I was like, well, I need to pay off a $500 debt to my brother because of a computer that I purchased from him. And I was like, well, should I get a job, like a part-time job at a coffee shop or something like that? Or should I focus on my passion and something that I really, really want to learn, you know, forever, like for the rest of my life? And I was like, well, what if I get a design job? Because I was already building websites for myself. I was already, you know, learning about these tools, Photoshop. Even before Photoshop, there was an application I think was called ULED, and Front Page, and all of these things, GeoCities, a lot of old, and eventually Flash. And so I had a bunch of these skill sets, and with those skill sets, especially, you know, I had some passion projects building communities, a forum for Jet Li, for example, because, you know, we were big fans of Jet Li at the time and The Matrix. And so I decided that I wanted a design job because I had some experience with it. And so I looked for a summer job, and I was like, well, okay, so, you know, I went to a headhunter group, and they referred me to this job. But the caveat was I was planning to basically take like a sabbatical year. Or not even a sabbatical, just a summer job. But the caveat was the job required someone full-time and not like an intern or a part-time job. And so I had to commit to it, which was actually a really good decision later on. And so I took the job, and, you know, I did really well. They gave me a raise after 6 months, and they saw that I was passionate. And yeah, I guess at the time I was already thinking about creating ideas, you know, putting products out there. And after 6 months, in fact, or after a year, because you know, you'll talk to a lot of designers, they don't tend to join a company, especially at the time, for more than a year, for example. And the reason why is because we're in Montreal, and Montreal is not necessarily considered the hub of product design or UI design or and whatnot. And so for me, it was very hard to find a job where I can stay and be passionate about the things that I create. So eventually, I created my first startup after leaving that first job. I didn't even think about returning to college. I just dropped out, and that was it for me. So the rest is history, of course. But I remember I started a company, and the company is still around. I mean, it's the same name. It's just that we reinvented the company. But at the time, I was really passionate about graphic design, so I created a community around graphic design, really hugely inspired by DeviantArt, and I wanted to see if I can learn PHP to create that community and to bring users, to bring people who have been following my work. Now, as you can see nowadays, I still do the same. So things definitely come around. And so today, I'm still doing the same things, but my first startup was definitely building a community, and we had an office. We had about 6 people, and it failed miserably for about 2 years. So this is my son, and he's obviously not aware that I'm doing a live stream right now. And so, Kyo. So basically, what I tried to do was I'm completely losing my train of thoughts right now. So I started my start. It failed, and then unfortunately, after 2 years, after that failure, because we had an office to pay for and all that stuff, I decided to go to go back to live in my parents' house. And at that point, I had to rebuild my entire career from start. And so yeah, I rebuilt. I went to work at Best Buy and stuff like that. I remember I had to restart everything from scratch. But that is just to show you that things are never easy, and it takes years and years and years to get to where I am. And it's totally fine. You should not give up, and you should not expect for things to be easy, especially in the first few years. And also, you should expect for things to pivot hugely as you get through your journey as a designer, as a founder, and whatever else you're passionate about. So I took these small jobs, eventually leading back to front end. And of course, I learned PHP. So graphic design at the time and print design specifically was really big, and was not paying well. So designers were not paid well at the time. UX designs, UI design was almost non-existent. And we're actually lucky to have such a vibrant community, a vibrant industry for designers nowadays. But back in the day, developers were easily making 2 or 3 times a designer's salary, which is why I decided to learn PHP, but also for my own reasons of building my own community. I don't want to depend on anyone to build my products. So I decided to learn PHP, HTML, and all those things, Flash. We had to learn so many things. I mean, if you think about Flash, it's the entire spectrum of design, animations, sound design, action script. And yeah, it was really, really challenging, but also really, really fun at the time. And so eventually I took jobs, incrementally, from Best Buy to eventually being a CSS person, a PHP person, because it was paying well. And I didn't take design for a while. And the reason why is because, coding was paying a lot more. And it still is, I'm not saying contrary. I think if you're taking today, like UX, of course, pays really well. Product design pays really well. You have to join a really good company. But otherwise, in general, coding pays much better. And also, coding doesn't require the same level of, dedication to the arts, right? Like, coder is very technical, so you can almost copy and paste, and that's good. I'm not saying coding is bad in that sense. I think that's awesome because you can literally take any course and it can tell you exactly how to do it, and you can do it. But if you want to learn design, I wish I could tell people to design in some way and they can quickly learn like that and apply it to their brand. It's not that simple. Because you have to learn about taste, you have to learn about colors, you have to learn about a lot of things that people think that is very subjective, and that's what's hard about design. Now, both have their strengths. Of course, coding requires a mindset of logic and problem solving, and and very pragmatic and organized and architectural, versus design or graphic design requires a lot of creativity and the creative juice flowing, right? So I did a lot of the two for the past 20 years, and eventually I got these startups and then joined as a designer, product designer, and at some point I was like, product manager sounds good, so let me just change my title to product manager. And I didn't know what the hell was going on with product manager, but I wanted to be a product manager. But yeah, my my whole thinking about product management nowadays is completely different as a founder than when I was thinking about product management when I was younger. But this whole evolution is really interesting, and um, eventually, and this is where I can start showing my work, because that was too old and it's really hard to find super old work from 15 years ago. But eventually, my work got recognized on Dribbble. And I remember I started joining Dribbble, and at the time, and this is where I started focusing back in design, was the iPhone. Like, Steve Jobs came out with the iPhone and was like, this changes everything. Suddenly design is at the forefront. UI, UX, user experience, and product design, all of these things were suddenly important now in a flow, and Apple was totally leading the way. Now you have to remember that back in the day, Windows was the main platform. Everyone was on Windows, including myself. I didn't have a Mac until I think 2004, 2005. And it took a lot of convincing for me to move to a Mac. But Windows was where everyone was doing their work, and Photoshop was on Windows. Everything was on Windows. But when the iPhone came, this completely changed the way design meant to a whole new audience. People of all groups and ages started using technology. And so the challenge at the time for a product designer was, how do you make something that is so alien to billions of people and making it familiar and comfortable? And that's why we had the rise of skeuomorphic design, as we call it. And so I spent a lot of time, because I had a lot of experience as a graphic designer, and a lot of designers will start in graphic design, and that's totally fine. You have to grind somewhere. And I think it's good to never lose touch of the execution, of the feel of what the product means when you're using it. So if you look at my old work, this is skeuomorphic design. We had a lot of textures, a lot of gradients, glow and effects, and metallic effects, bubble effects, wood, and a lot of different experimentation, lights, and it had to somewhat replicate real life. And we still replicate real life if you think about it. It's just that we don't do it from a visual design perspective, but more from a UX perspective, or at least a transitional perspective or animation perspective. But back in the day, it was a lot about static design, which means that all our options were to formulate things around visual design. And so a lot of experimentation around textures and replicating real life, a badge or a menu for a restaurant or a calendar. And a lot of these, trying to digitalize things, but without losing the essence of what it means to use the same things in real life. And so this is where my work started getting noticed in Silicon Valley. And so for any designer out there, maybe not now, actually maybe now more than ever, to be fair, is to get noticed in the world, right? You could have the ambition of being in your local area, which there's nothing wrong with that. Or you can have the ambition of reaching the world, the biggest companies, or the most caring companies in the valley, and the places where we call the hub of people who really care about product design. And so Dribbble is one of those platforms that has thrived for many, many years and has been a place where recruiters and founders find the best designers out there. So I was really lucky to have been found by a founder who was in the valley, and I got a job, and that was my dream job. So I decided to move to San Francisco. And prior to that, I joined a bunch of startups, 5 or 6 startups in Montreal. Never really found my calling, because at the time we were all trying to replicate the success of Facebook and YouTube, and we didn't really understand the idea, the philosophy, the principles around building products. And that's why I'm saying you have to switch your mindset to that approach. And when you switch that mindset, it starts making sense. But before switching to that mindset, you have to open your mind, and you have to start thinking the world rather than just your own little bubble. And instead of copying a design, you have to copy the principles, the foundation. Instead of copying a copy, you copy the original, right? So you always look at the source rather than looking at the copy of copies. Such, for example, instead of copying a company that copies Apple, well, you copy Apple. I mean, Apple is just a really, really good source because they're typically the source to every single copies. But even going further, Apple gets inspired a lot by, let's say, Dieter Rams in their product design. So you look into the source of Apple, and then you can even go even further, the source of Dieter Rams and the source of the heroes of your heroes. And it's a fascinating research for a lot of designers to never think about the end of that cheap sort of copy, but rather the source of all inspirations. And so I was really lucky. I moved to San Francisco, and I was on a visa, which was a training visa. Now, funny story about me is that I dropped out of college, which I mentioned, but also, we're in Canada, so we're neighbors with the US, and typically it's not hard to work in the US as a Canadian. But the thing is, since I didn't go to college, I didn't get my degree, I couldn't get on that TN visa. So the only choice left, which was the J1 visa, which is a student visa or a trainee visa. And so that's the one that I went on. But the thing is, it was limited to, I believe, 12 to 24 months, if I remember. And then you had to somehow jump on an H1B, which basically most people in the Valley go for. I don't know if it's still the case, but that's where I was. And we tried for that visa while I was working for 12 to 16 months at the startup. And this is where my work started getting noticed. And I did a lot of freelance work and client work. And, eventually I joined this company called HeyZap. And that's my blog here. And this is where I detail my journeys, mengto.com, if you want to take a look at it. It's still online today. I'm still saying that I live in San Francisco, but, I don't, obviously. And you can look at some of the work that I did back in the day. And that was a platform for gaming. And we were doing designs for both iOS and Android. And at the time, I was like, it doesn't make sense that we're building UI on Photoshop, which is an application made for photo editing and 3D and lighting and brushing and graphic design mostly, and print design, where we should be focusing on UI design, something that is completely new paradigm. If you think about the innovations of Figma and Sketch, those innovations would not be possible if we were still in that mindset of Photoshop. Because only with those platforms that you could start thinking about, okay, auto layout and constraints and prototyping and distances and handoff and inspection, measure and plugins. So I remember back in the day, I started blogging about my experience as a designer and was like, and this was in 2013, where I was like, well, I'm going to share some techniques about my experience. And it's all started with, maybe I can share about coding a website, about scrolling. And this is where it started making sense to a lot of people. This is where I started attracting some attention and people following my work, was me using Sketch and comparing that to Photoshop. So this was my start. And this is, if you will, the ignition that really propel design code as an idea, as where I am today, but the first step towards that goal. And so I started using this application called Sketch. Nobody was using it. Nobody was talking about it. And I remember we increasingly had trouble creating UI for Photoshop, and it was hugely complex. A lot of the things were not made for code. And that, I think that was the things that clicked to me, was that all of these things that you can do in Photoshop cannot be done in code unless you do very hackish things. If you think about it, back in the day when you do HTML, to do a rounded corners, you had to create like 9, I remember like 9 corners, and then you had to tile those corners and to put them in the right places. So it took this much code to just create a rounded rectangle where you can put your content inside that container. And that was because everything, well, CSS was not ready. It didn't have the sort of a border radius property. And so we had to hack a lot of things, CSS sprites and all of these things. And, the same with Photoshop. We had to do everything manually. The different properties that you have in Photoshop, the brushing, all of these things were not possible. But then came an application called Sketch, where everything you do in Sketch can be done in code. And that clicked to me, because I don't need to care about all of these other things that code doesn't care about anymore. And so, yeah, I started talking about code-friendly designs and, why I'm using Sketch, designing with numbers instead of dragging a bunch of things, and to be really about distances and rulers and grid settings, and that resonated with a lot of people. So that was, even before I started design code, that was the first fire that really propelled my direction towards that. And eventually I started comparing that to Fireworks. Fireworks, for those who don't remember, is the default application that Adobe had and a lot of people love. And unfortunately, they discontinued it, and eventually a lot of people moved to Sketch instead because of that. And so that's when I started talking about pixel perfection and, retina display and designing for iOS, designing for Android. And the second part of that journey was eventually to talk about Xcode. Because as a designer who does CSS, who does HTML and PHP at the time, I don't do PHP anymore. I know it's very, very old. Now we do React, but as a designer who codes, it just made sense for designers to bring that approach to Xcode as well, because no designers were taking care of the implementation, and we had to rely everything on developers to do the implementation of the design. And back in the day, nobody was prototyping, and I found that to be very interesting. And especially nobody was prototyping in the coding tools. I remember I used to code and design in a browser at some point because I was like, why should I design in a design tool when I can just do everything in CSS, right? Now, my mindset has changed a little bit over the years, but the thing is, there's always an evolution to all of these things. Nowadays, I do believe that designing in the design tools, because the design tools is so efficient and so fast, it makes a lot more sense to do it in the design tool instead. And then you're not limited in terms of creativity. You're not because the design tool essentially is becoming more and more like a coding tool because of auto layout constraints and components and overrides, all of these things that are concept that have been around for decades in code, right? And when you're designing on a design tool like Figma and Sketch nowadays, it doesn't feel anymore like just a Photoshop, right? It feels like you're actually building something as well. And that's what I love about design tools nowadays, which is why I do believe that it's just a more efficient way to do that instead of designing in a browser using CSS directly versus, because in CSS, it can be painful as well. Especially nowadays, especially if you rely on React and, creating your own server, and there's a lot of things like libraries and connecting to GitHub. Those things are actually more complex than it used to be back in the day, where you can just open a code editor like Front Page. Of course, Front Page is the worst example, but a lot of people know about this. I used to use Espresso. I used to use Espresso was the ones that I used a lot back in the day. And things have changed a lot. And this is where I started in terms of blogging. And with that blogging, I also went on Twitter in 2007. And with that blogging and those ideas and sharing about Sketch, a lot of people started following me. And with that following, that's when you start creating a brand. Now, this makes a lot of sense, right? Like nowadays, you want to be a creator. And in fact, I think this is kind of like the golden age of creators because of YouTube, because of Twitter, because of Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat. We are at the age of creators, where creators can make literally millions in terms of sponsorship, monetizations, content, and have a huge subscriber base. Now, if you think about it, it's all decentralized nowadays, so you don't have to rely on a TV or being in some sort of a program and appearing on TV or in a journal to get some recognition. Nowadays, you can just post something on Twitter or YouTube or any of these social medias, and you start getting subscribers, and those subscribers eventually follow your work. And as they get into your content, then you can start monetization. And so a lot of people, I think, can benefit from this idea of creating that subscriber base and teaching or just sharing or entertaining, whatever that may be. But that's how I started. And it was not clear at the time, but it becomes clear when, after 16 months at that startup, my visa got denied. So I applied for an H-1B. I had 12 years experience, and they were expecting 3 years of college, which I did not have. And for them, it was more valuable to have 3 years of college than it was to have 12 years of experience as a designer. I mean, think about it, right? And so I got the unlucky end of that stick, and I had to be kicked out of the US. And it was a huge brick that really came. And I was devastated. That was the end of my dream. And I didn't know what to do, right? Like, I had to go back to Montreal and maybe find work and some startup that might want to, where I did not really enjoy doing that, where to be a copy was not something that I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I wanted to be an inspiration, someone who can start things rather than be at the end of those copies. And so I was like, F it, I'm just gonna travel, right? I went back, and me and my girlfriend, we decided to travel for whatever amount of time that our wallet could allow us. And we had about 20K to sustain ourselves for that travel. So to give you some photos, this is my apartment in San Francisco. Really expensive, by the way. I'm not one person to mince with the spending. I like to spend where it gives me a sense of, how do you say, if people expect something of me this way, I should expect something of myself in this way as well. And so to me, one thing that was really important was to be efficient in the time that I spent. And I apply that philosophy everywhere, including in my startup, where whenever I take an apartment, I have to be right next to the office. I don't like commuting because I think that's a waste of time. And I don't like, cheaping out, basically, on whatever it is. Either it is food or it is an apartment. I think you only live once, and you should enjoy your life, and you should have a good balance. You should not, bootstrap yourself to a point where it's unhealthy. So to me, everything is an experience, and that experience teaches to me and to others as well. And this is my non-modest apartment in San Francisco, which costs a lot of money, and I was fine paying that. Of course, you're making a lot of money in San Francisco when you work for these startups. Lucky for us, in the remote world, we can now, if you're really good at what you do, you can get salaries scale to San Francisco, and and live in a place that is much cheaper than San Francisco. So we're really lucky in that sense. But this is my non-modest apartment in San Francisco. I remember we went to WWDC, and yeah, once my visa got denied, I was like, okay, let's just travel. And the first destination was Singapore. And Singapore, for those who don't know, is one of the most advanced cities in the world, and they're incredibly well managed. It came from a super poor country into one of the richest countries in the world in a span of 50 years. And if you ever visit San Francisco, not San Francisco, but Singapore, I highly suggest your first destination to be Singapore, because they speak English. They're extremely forward thinking. They have they have an amazing startup environment. They have beautiful architectures, and it's extremely friendly. Beautiful place. And all of these photos that I'm going to show you are taken by me. None of these is from Unsplash or otherwise. I like to do photography as a hobby. So we went hotel to hotel. Is not, depending on which hotel you choose or where you are, like Bali, for example, is really cheap. So you can travel very inexpensively. So I remember, freelancing a little bit. You can see that this is my laptop in this beautiful studio room inside one of the most beautiful hotels I've ever been to. And we went to many hotels. Yeah, we have Pizza here in the audience saying hi from Singapore. I met him in Singapore. And so, yeah, we went to Bali. We took a lot of photos. And so that's my journey. We travel about 20 countries, 30 cities around the world. But in between that, I went to Hong Kong. And Hong Kong, let me see if I can find the photos. So I took a job because at some point I was running out of money, right? And so I had to take a job. And so again, based on the same philosophy or the same sort of my approach, I took an apartment next door to the startup that I joined, and I worked there for about 6 months. And this is where I learned how to work with an iOS developer who taught me a lot about iOS development, and eventually I blogged a lot about iOS development as well, for designers especially. And so, we stayed here for about 6 months, and it was really a lot of fun. I could only stay for 6 months. Again, the same issue, the visa issue. So I had to move after 6 months. So eventually we visited a lot of more countries, and such as Kuala Lumpur, such as Bali, and we even did some pre-wedding shots, me and my girlfriend, and I'm that annoying tourist that's basically taking this sort of like ancient spot and take pictures because it was beautiful. But it was a great experience, and if you travel, it's a perfect opportunity to have pre-wedding shots so that you can remember this for the rest of your lives. And a lot of beautiful places, and you can literally work, especially now more than ever, you can work from home. You can work from traveling, either in Bali or other places. And yeah, learning from not just learning, but actually creating my first book. And after 6 months in Hong Kong, that's when I was like, well, what do I do? Do I keep freelancing? And freelancing can be pretty good paying. If you're good with finding clients and stuff like that, you can make 5, 10, 20K a month, but it's not stable, right? Like, and also it depends on the quality of clients that you have. And I was like, well, I'm starting to have a bunch of followers on Twitter and from my blog. What if I create a book? Okay, and what if I teach people about Sketch, about design, and about prototyping and developing on iOS as a designer? And so that was the start of Design Plus Code, and that's when I started writing my book while traveling, right? And I was in Tokyo, Okinawa. We went to many cities, Osaka, and we again jumped from hotel to hotel. I remember we love to experiment with different places, so we only stayed about 3 days per hotel, and that was sort of like the perfect number to get an idea of the place, inspiration, and then moving on to the next exploration without having to sort of like drive the whole day back and forth and staying at the same hotel. So the hotel was the place where we can explore around that hotel. So we only stayed 3 days per hotel. We went to, I don't know, hundreds of hotels during those 2 years. And that's when I started writing my book around Design Plus Code. And yeah, my first expectation was about 200 copies of the book. I was selling about $50 per copy, and I was like, well, if I can sell 200 copies of my book, I can make about $10,000, which would pay for about 1 to 2 months of traveling, right? And that was my first initial goal. Little did I know that when I launched that book on Twitter, we had reached, I believe, 500 copies within a week, which means that we made more than enough to travel for the next 6 months just in 1 week's time. And again, I'm not saying this is going to happen to everyone, but sometimes things happen and they just explode and you just never know, right? Like, you have to experiment, you have to try. You cannot be scared to experiment and to see what works and what doesn't work. Being a design founder is a lot about experimentation, and those experimentation lead to better ideas and you cannot stay stagnant. And if you look at the whole like history of where we are and where we were before, we have changed tremendously over the past 6 years. We started as a book. Eventually, now we're a video platform. We started as a writing first. Eventually, now it's all online. It's all video focus. You know, we started as Sketch, or even not Photoshop, but definitely Sketch, and we experiment with a lot of applications. Now we're focusing a lot on Figma. We started a lot on just iOS. Now we also do React and Flutter. We started with Swift. Even before Swift, we started with Objective-C, and then we had to get into Swift because Swift came out later, and eventually Swift UI came out, and then we moved to the best, the ones that we feel that after experimenting, we can start using that. So you should chase good products, not money. A lot of people, you know, they see something and they're like, well, this person is making a lot of money, so I should do that. The problem with that is it doesn't last, right? You cannot get your calling by following money, unless of course money is your passion. I mean, that's fair. Okay, if money is really your passion and you only think about money, and whatever you do you don't care, and money is your first thing that comes to mind, that's fine. But if you don't want to feel like you work at all for the rest of your life, then you should always enjoy every single aspect of your job, including design, including, it should not feel like a job, right? So it's not about money, it's about products. So more specifically, you have to enjoy the tools as your daily driver. So for example, if you really enjoy the iPhone, then maybe do a job around the iPhone. If you really enjoy Figma, or if you really enjoy, I don't know, Xcode, if you really enjoy design or graphic design, you have to build your life around that good product that you really enjoy. Or if you really enjoy, like, I don't know, Instagram, well, you have to build your whole career around that. And it's not about money, it's really about chasing good products. And it's also about always iterating every single day your process, because your process always needs improvement. There's no silver bullet in terms of what is the best way to hire, what is the best way to design something. There will always be new, better tools, better platforms today, next week, in 1 year. So you have to always chase the good products. Now, I'm not saying everyone should do that, but it has worked really well for me to not be in a stagnant place to work. And, you know, if we only focus on just the things that we're comfortable with, we would be sticking to Photoshop. We would be sticking to HTML and PHP, right? But nowadays, our process and our platforms are so completely different from before. And, you know, you always have to iterate your process, and you always have to cut ruthlessly the things that don't work. So for example, for me, you know, if it's too much commuting, cut it. Yes, it's gonna cost, but you're gonna make that money back by chasing the high-paying jobs or the high-paying subscribers or clients or customers. Don't focus on, you know, the cheap, you know, because if you want the cheap audience, well, they will also want the cheap products. So that's the thing to be aware of. Not saying that that's wrong, but you have to know where to focus on. And so we like to focus on quality. And so because we focus on quality, we have to expect ourselves to create quality products and to also ruthlessly take out the things that are in the way of creating a good product. So if it's about commuting, if it's about, you know, the process in which we involve, or it's about the tools that we're using, you have to cut the ones that don't make sense. And so you have to do that ruthlessly. Now, let's talk a little bit about revenue back then, before now, and now. So when I started, I think I was making about, obviously the first year when you create your first product, it's gonna jump. There's always a little high jump, and then it goes and it's steady up, right? It goes down tremendously and it steadies. Now, a lot of designers and founders, they bet everything on that first little launch, whether it's on Product Hunt, which is great for makers. But the thing is, you have to think more long term. You have to think about shipping fast without necessarily taking out the essence of the product, and how to ship in stages of that product. Like how you're going to be planning version 2 or version 3. So I learned that very early on with Shadowness, which is the community that I started. We had about 50,000 designers, graphic designers at the time. It was hugely popular for a website at the time. It was about 2003. And I remember I iterated 8 times on that website. Every single year, I would create a new version by myself. And that taught me a lot about iterations and about launching products in stages rather than betting everything on a single launch. And so that was really important for me to do that. When I first launched Design Code, I launched the first chapter, and then 2 weeks later the second chapter, 2 weeks later the third chapter. So second chapter is sketch, first chapter is design, and third chapter is Xcode. So I didn't launch everything at once. And we also had an early access where we had a pre-order, and that got people to want more, and also that allowed me to launch the product within about 2 to 4 weeks. When you're creating a book or even a channel, a YouTube channel, a lot of people think, oh, well, it's going to take 3 months, 6 months, 1 year. Get that out of your head, right? Start right now. Don't wait. And do it incrementally. Apply that to every single thing that you do in life. Don't wait for things to happen. You have to be the master of your life. I like to think about, you have to be the designer of your life. You have to design your life. As a designer, you are in control. You control how much time you're commuting. You control when and where to eat food or sleep and whatnot. You control all of these things, and you have to ruthlessly really like design your entire life around what you want, and don't be afraid to do that first step. So, for example, right now, I'm fairly old for a person in this industry. I'm almost 40 years old, and for a lot of people, this is pretty old. But I'm not afraid, even despite my age, to try new things. So, for example, only recently that we started getting into YouTube, as you can see by these live streams. And for about a year, I didn't really pay much attention, but I just went video by video, and eventually it starts to work. We now have 50,000, 55,000 subscribers. It's not a huge number, but it's a start, and that's fine, right? Like, you have to start somewhere. So don't be afraid to take that first step and to constantly add new things, iterate, do better, and look at the feedback. And like I said, Design Code, we first started at about 1,000, maybe 100,000 in the first year, or 200,000. But nowadays, we have 1 million per year. And it was not that easy all the time, right? I was alone. I was doing everything by myself for the first 5 years. It's only for the past 2-3 years, actually, that we started having a team. So if you look at the all-time revenue, so I don't know if I can go by the year. Yeah, yearly. So in 2014, 257K, and then I kept iterating. A lot of people, they start their first product, they put on product on, or they create their first video, it's not successful, or it's successful and they have a one hit, and then it goes down forever, and then they lose hope. But that's not how you should build a product or a startup or a channel or a YouTube channel or whatever it is that's gonna get you the audience you want. So you can see that the first year we made about 250K, and the second year we actually made more than the first year. And that's because I kept releasing new content all the time. And I kept iterating the website, made it better. I did the same process, which is, design code version 1 and design code version 2, design code version 3. And, we actually made better. Now, the little dip here on the third year, this was actually because I wanted to step back, and we had the birth of our son, and we also wanted to settle. So, life cannot all be about work, right? You cannot just spend your whole time. If you think about where I am today, I don't work more than 40 hours a week. I know a lot of people think that, starting a startup, maybe the first few months, the first few years is a lot harder, but it doesn't have to be that way for the rest of your life. Now, sometimes you have to step back, and that was the birth of my son, and we wanted to buy a house to settle, and then we had a daughter as well, and we moved into our dream house. So definitely we took time to appreciate life and to have a good balance. Yes. You want to say hi? So she's right here. Um, and so yeah, take your time, have a good balance. And I remember the first time that yes. So she likes looking in the pictures. And yeah, this was the house, the first day, and we were so excited. And yeah, my son is like super into Mario. He likes to disguise himself. And so because he likes it, my daughter also does that. So they copy each other, and they copy us as parents. So this is why we're doing all of these things. It's just so beautiful. All right, so he saw his picture and it was like, oh yeah, this is me. Um, another thing that we do is every single year we travel with the team. So we go to Tokyo. So this was actually in Osaka, and this is pizza from Singapore. So we have our team, and we travel with the team. And also, when I was traveling, I took advantage of that opportunity to actually do workshops and to visit people and teach people in person. We had, I think, about 50 workshops in total. This one was in Shanghai, and San Francisco. We had a team trip to Osaka. We had also a workshop in San Francisco at the Figma office, and Philadelphia, I believe, or Washington. I don't remember exactly. I think yeah, it was Washington. So yeah, everything is an opportunity, and you know, it's important to really stop and look at what you can do in life, and to not forget that there are opportunities everywhere. You can't just be focused on what you can't have. You have to focus on what you already have and make it better. And so that's definitely something that I try to take at to heart when I do these things. So let's go over where we are right now. Now, one of the big questions is, when should you start a team, right? When does it make sense to start a team? Because right now, as a design founder, you're probably going to be, okay, I have a side project. Maybe you already have a full-time job at the moment. Maybe you're building your own iOS app. You're thinking about, charging $1 per download, or you're starting your YouTube channel, or you're starting your TikTok channel, and you have a bunch of followers, and you're like, well, how do I split my time, and how do I get that to a point where I can focus more on it? First of all, the first thing I want to say is, don't give up. If you enjoy doing what you do, go it incrementally. Spend your weekends, spend your evenings, and create these pieces of content that people really enjoy. Get feedback, okay? Because that feedback is so incredibly important. And to really care about design, and when I say design, I mean like the details. Because to me, anyone who cares about the details, if you're a developer, it shows to me that you really want to design your life. You want to execute on every aspect of your life. And always ask for feedback. And which is why it's so incredibly important that we have these tools and social media sites such as Twitter, where you can post your work and get feedback instantly. If people like it, they will like it, and that you use that feedback as a way to say, maybe I should do more of that, right? And I think that's really powerful. Inspirations. Like I said, don't go at the end of the copies, go for the source. And the source for a lot of designers is Apple. And of course, you can go even to the originals of Apple, which is also great. You can read a book about Steve Jobs, about Dieter about Johnny Ive. Those are great ideas. And I think that's a fantastic way to find inspiration to build your startup. And you also have to be more specific. You can't just go very general, right? You have to be very specific. So Apple, what are they good at? What are the sites or the pages or the products that you really enjoy at Apple? You can't just say, I love Apple, and stop with that. You have to think, okay, what products do I like to use? What problems are they solving? What page that really inspires me? What technique that I find really exceptional? So when you get into those details, then you look into Stripe, for example, which is a prime example for websites. They create some of the best looking websites and technically challenging websites. And then you also have to look at YouTube. Nowadays, especially in the past few years, YouTube has exploded in terms of content. And like I said, we have so many creators nowadays that teach all kinds of things on YouTube. So go to YouTube and look at how people can succeed creating content. You can just Google it, search the content, look at what people do, and create a basic setup like this one. You have a microphone. Of course, you don't need to start with this setup. You can start with your iPhone. You can start with a simple $50, $100 microphone, or use your laptop, and it's totally fine. If you look at my first videos that I created was on a MacBook Air, and I did all my first videos on a MacBook Air for design code, and nobody complained at the time. So don't be afraid to start still with good quality, right? I'm not saying go with the cheapest, things ever, but a MacBook is great, and it's a quality product, and it does so many things. The iPhone is great. It's a quality products, and it can create so many things. So start like that, and don't wait to buy this $1,000 setup, for example, this Shure microphone, and I had to get my Rodecaster in order to get the right volume settings for the microphone, which is a little bit more professional. And this $6,000 monitors, you don't need it, and which is the Pro XDR by Apple. You don't need $1,000 stand. these are extra things that if you really believe in the product later and if you can afford it, go for it. But if not, start simple. And so these are my inspirations. This is how I start when I go about creating a product or starting like to think about, monetizations and revenues and stuff like that. So do a lot of research. Well, research, when I say research, to me is mostly using products, right? A lot of people think, oh yeah, I have to do research, I have to do a bunch of phone calls, and I have to send a bunch of emails. That's boring. I never do that. Okay? Research should come to you in your daily life. To all the UX designers out there, if you're learning UX, don't wait to read like tons of books and go about these A/B testing and wait for your company to pay for people to come to the office and do A/B testing. No, to me, UX research is about you and the products that you use. That's it, right? You're on your phone, and you're on your phone, and you use your favorite products. You study it. You try to understand what works, what doesn't work. You look at the feedback, and you do analytics. You focus on the things that you love first and foremost, and yeah, you use it obsessively. And when I say obsessively, that's the key. And what I notice is a lot of successful designers and developers, they start getting good because they're obsessed. Obsession to detail, obsession to the craft. And that's why money will never be able to buy that, right? When you follow money, all of this is meaningless. But when you don't follow money, and when you follow the things that you love in life, and the things that you use in life, and the things that you design in life, then you get your UX research. And that's how I learn as a UX designer. And the same with, Googling, right? Like you Google and search things, and you go to these events. Whenever you need answers for your coding problems, you go to Stack Overflow to get inspired, especially what is new and what Apple comes out with. You go to WWDC or Google I/O, and Google everything, check on YouTube, learn everything on YouTube. And if you can afford it, pay for courses, because your time is limited, right? You don't have all the time in the world. So do you have time for ads? Do you have time for, kind of like searching for all of these things that you have to put together? Because let's say you want to learn code, you go to YouTube, you go to Google, you might have to spend hours and hours kind of like stitching everything together for everything to start making sense. But when you start having, let's say, enough money to afford for a course, that's when you're saving time, because that's the whole idea, is to save time. You don't have to watch ads. You don't have to research all of these things for that curriculum or to that path that you need to take to learn a new craft. So that's when, if you can afford it, buy a course. And a course allows you to have everything you need to start from point A and to reach your goals. So really, really important to use everything and to think about your time and to be efficient. So in terms of the tools that we use for product design, we use a lot Figma nowadays. We use Notion for collaboration. So Notion is really important for, we do that for both task management and, for example, we have a bunch of goals and it's just tasks that we do every week. And we also put the content for the courses that are coming. So right now, for example, we're working on another advanced SwiftUI course for Combine. SwiftUI for iOS 14. There's going to be a new one for WWDC 2021. So the content for tutorials, the content for live streams that we put on the website where we don't have ads, and we also share all the source files. for all the designs and the code that we do. So that's the plan. That's the game plan. Another thing that I like to say also is that, you know, everything is a strategy for you to move forward and to do better. And think of it as a game of StarCraft or a game of Civilization. And you strategize your life around how do you make the most resources. You know, like those little not enough minerals. You know, that's essentially what life is. You know, you have to get those resources, you have to strategize, you have to build your army, and eventually you succeed, right? After many trials and many failures, you're gonna get there. So, you know, think of it like a game. It's fun. Games have to be fun. If games were not fun, why the hell would you do it? So life is the same thing. Your product is the same thing. If it's not fun, why are you doing it? Right? And why should you be motivated to do better? So I think that's a really important lesson for me. So Figma is, I've discussed at length about Figma. I've shown in the past live streams. Another thing that really helped me was to have a good understanding of development as a designer and the constraints without limiting the creativity. And I think a lot of designers are going to struggle with that because they don't really understand the constraints and development. And this especially pertains to UI, to graphic designers and UX designers, because typically they don't communicate a lot with developers. And I think that's actually not a great thing. You should communicate. You should understand what the constraints are, because if you understand what the constraints are, you understand how to be efficient at it, right? And you can be more successful on the first go, or on the second go, or on the third go, versus having to fail 5, 10 times. Not saying that, you know, that's not going to happen. Happens a lot, but typically you can avoid a lot of mistakes by having a better understanding of the craft and the constraints and engineering of the product. So distribution, you know, use product hunt, email, Twitter, social media. And let's talk about hiring now. So when I started going from one person to having a team is when I thought my tasks are getting too repetitive. Not saying that I don't enjoy them. I think as a founder, you have to enjoy, you're kind of like the concierge of everything. And you have to do and close the gaps of every single task out there. And so it's important to enjoy those things because you're solving a problem, you're getting a product out there. And the whole idea of having that goal is why you can enjoy sending replying to an email or a DM or whatever it is that might get repetitive. But at some point, it's not scalable, right? At some point, you're gonna have too many emails, you're gonna have too many DMs, you're gonna have too many people asking questions or requiring different fixes. That's when you need to start thinking about a team. The team is there to pick up where you feel is getting too repetitive for you. Not saying that you don't enjoy it, but it's not scalable anymore. And so when you start hiring hiring people is when you start hating repetitive tasks. And a lot of people think that, you know, you should hire the best. Sure, but to what degree, right? To what context? To what budget? Because everyone has constraints. This is why I'm saying constraints is important. You can't, like, let's say, even if you're a founder that's looking for VC funding, and let's say you have millions in, you know, in investment, it doesn't mean that you should just burn everything and buy, you know, not buy, but hire people who are in an order of magnitude what you can afford in terms of what you bring in terms of revenue versus what you have to expense. So it's important to understand constraints. And to me, hiring the best has a different meaning. When I hire the best, I don't necessarily hire the best, you know, the best who, let's say Steve Jobs was pretty famous for hiring the best of the best. Of course, you can afford it. He has billions at the time. But for most of us who owns YouTube channels or who have some content or a side product, makes a few $1,000s a month from it, we can't hire the best. How do you expect us to hire the best? We can, partner, collaborate, sure. And eventually, if you make more than, let's say, 200K a year, you can start hiring someone because it gets repetitive. For us, we wanted to hire people who can take on the repetitive tasks first. Because unless you want to stop working on creating whatever you're creating for the product, you don't necessarily want to hire someone that's going to do that work for you, right? It's like me saying, should I hire someone to do the videos for me to teach people, when people know that I'm the one that they enjoy, getting taught on those topics, right? So you have to understand that. And so, yeah, for us, we hire people who are early designers and developers, and we don't have like Silicon Valley salary. Of course, it's completely nuts for us. So for us, it's Montreal-based salary, which is pretty decent, and people work remotely. It's 100% remote. And another thing that we do, which is very unique to us, is that we started hiring a lot of family, which it doesn't necessarily make sense for everyone, right? For us, it makes sense because family is the most resilient people that you can hire, right? They can take it, okay? You can criticize them. They're gonna come back and they're not gonna quit. And the other thing is, when you hire a lot of people who are skilled and then you barely know, it's wrong, but let's say they're not happy with something, they give up, they find another company within 3 months. And it becomes harder to hire the best people. And so for me, if you have friends and family who are really interested and you know that they're easy to work with, try it. I'm not saying it's gonna work, but for us it has worked. And so, on top of that early skill, it's also important that you have the expectations right, that you have the discipline, that they understand that nothing is personal, right? So if they're doing a bad work, give them mentorship, give them direction, give them the support necessary, and allow them to grow within that context. So we hire family because they can take it. And when we need something like support or whatever else, they can do it because they believe in the vision, because they've seen you grow over the years as a founder. So again, we can't compete with costs, but we can help with mentorship, and we can hire early designers and developers. We can help them grow. And on top of that, they have more skin in the game. So this is really important because when you have skin in the game, you don't give up and you don't have a choice, right? Like, why would you give up when you have such an opportunity where you might not have that opportunity elsewhere, right? So to have the support and the mentorship and the right environment that allows you to learn on the job by getting paid, I think is key to having longevity in terms of the people that stays with you for many, many years, and to allow for mistakes. We all make mistakes, and that's totally fine. Now, I'm not saying you should make mistakes all the time. When you make mistakes, don't repeat those mistakes. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't make the mistakes, but you should not repeat the mistakes. And you should be there to give the feedback necessary for people to not repeat that mistake. So yeah, they were starting with support, and then eventually we had to figure out whether they wanted to be a designer or a coder. A lot of people actually never had design or coding experiences. So I'm thinking about my cousin Willie and my sister, who came from a financial world, and nowadays, after 3 years, she's one of the best backend engineers I've ever worked with. So that is to show you that with the right freedom, the right support, and the right attitude, and not giving up over the years. Because if you join a company and you're only staying for 3 months, it's not going to allow you to get to that level of tough skin that's going to allow you to get somewhere. But now she's amazing, and the same with my cousin who's not really who's really into UI. It took a while, because at the beginning we had to figure out, well, we know he likes games, right? But how do you create a career? We're not a gaming company. So we started creating courses around gaming, around Unity and stuff like that. But it was difficult, because to create a course, it takes a certain level of commitment, and you have to build a game that is a demo for that course. Because at Design Plus Code, we like to build things, and then we teach what we build. And so it was not easy, but eventually we figured it out. Eventually, Willie really got into UI and focused on UI and design. And so it takes time. In fact, it took him about 2 years to get to where he is nowadays. So in terms of interview, I don't like I said, I'm a founder. I do a lot of things in the company. You can ask any of my staff member. I do everything, right? Like if I look at the GitHub repo for the website and the iOS app, I'm like the top 2 contributors of both of those projects. So I do everything, and I design. I almost design 100% of the app and the website. I design 100% of the iOS app almost, and I do these live streams. I do the courses. So I do a lot of things on a daily basis. And when you take all of those things into consideration, you have to be very critical of the way you're going to be spending your time. And so whether it's hiring, whether it's management, you have to delegate as much as possible, but also you cannot spend, weeks and weeks to interview people. So for me, it was only a single interview. Normally, you look for attention to detail. You look at their portfolio, which is why anyone who's looking to apply for a job should always look for the portfolio and the work that they put out there on GitHub, on Twitter, on social media, on YouTube, whatever it is that follows you everywhere. Even let's say you're a content creator, you create YouTube videos around coding. Even if you're not making enough money on YouTube, your content is still there, and you're showing your employers, if you're looking for a job, that you're able to be pragmatic and you have a process. You're putting your skin out there in terms of the way you work, and that is very, very convincing for hiring, which is why when I say I don't like to spend a lot of time in interviews, and I look for these details, these portfolios, the things that they have done, the things that they have put out there, the tweets they have done, to give me a fair judgment on if that's the person that I'm looking for. So I don't spend a lot of time, and usually that's how I hire. And in terms of working with early designers and developers, it's normal at the beginning. They're gonna have a lot of trouble with quality, because quality is the thing that takes the most time in your career. At the beginning, you will try to be speedy, right? You will try to do everything fast, reckless. You make a lot of mistakes. You don't know where you're going, and you always need help. But the thing is, you have to learn how to overcome that, and you have to learn to balance speed and strength. And so for us, it also depends on your personality. What I notice is that this has a lot to do with personality and the way you have grown up when you were younger. And if you're not focusing on quality, start now, regardless of it's about your project, about your career, or about your life. Focus on quality, because when you start focusing on quality, it's going to apply to everything, including your career. And so if you haven't done that yet, you will struggle with your job, especially with quality. And I think it's good to have a balance of the two. It's also good to be pragmatic, and it's also good to focus on one thing that you're really good at first versus trying to do everything right at first. And so quality, once you get to that level of quality that people respect you and value you for in the company, then you can start spreading your talents. I mean, think about it, right? A lot of people, they're like, well, I want to, if it's too hard, I want to move to something else. But the thing is, being hard is part of what makes you valuable in the company. If your task is easy, why would I keep you? Or why would any company keep you? Right? Why would you want someone else to take your job because you have given up? Right? So quality and the fact that your work is hard is good, because that's what keeps your job. That's what gives you the job. That's what makes you relevant in a company. So don't give up because it's hard. In fact, you should be thankful that it's hard, because then you know for sure that the company needs you, that nobody else in the team can do what you do. And that's the best feeling in the world. So don't give up when it gets hard. In terms of the team management, yes, we're 100% remote. We do Monday meeting about 2 hours every single week. We love to talk about where we are in terms of analytics. So a lot of companies, they are very analytics driven. And when I say analytics, you go to Google Analytics, you go to Firebase Analytics, Stripe Analytics, and comments and all those things, or YouTube Studio, and you look at everything, and that should give you a fairly good indication of where you want to go in the next 1 year or 6 months or even 5 years. So analytics driven is where we are. We present that every single Monday morning, where we are, what works, what course work, what content works. All of these things is what brings us to what we need to do that specific week. It's all natural. You don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? So, of course, things don't always come to you. You have to find the inspiration. You can't just expect things to come to you. And so you have to practice. Friday, we try to do presentations. We speak about ideas, especially before. Right now, we're more trying to kind of like cool off a little bit because of the pandemic stuff. And we want to make sure that nobody is depressed or, very motivated. And yes, I'm French, so the way I say analytics can be weird. And so the way I say some words can also be weird. All right. So yeah, presentation is such a good skill. So we try to do a lot of presentation skills. Go in front of the team, or go on Zoom, or talk and do a presentation on Keynote. And I think it's really important because it's a very, very good skill. Presentation is one of those things that a lot of people don't care about, but it's so incredibly important. Whether it's you going to an interview, or you going to network with people at a party, or you creating a YouTube video, or creating any type of content, you need that skill, and you need that everywhere. And you need to design your life around that. So we do that a lot. The way you speak, the way you're not shy, the way you're not nervous, makes you forget about the meaningless stuff and focus on the meaningful. And that's why you always want to focus on the meaningful. So good understanding of design and engineering gives you the best estimates. So everyone in our team, we encourage them to do both design and code, including developers doing design and designers doing code. So always encourage them. I've explained that many times. So for example, we're trying to turn a lot of graphics into Swift code, and the designers did that. And also I tried to get developers to do UI and also to do some of the easier screens, or even to do like the adaptiveness of the layouts. And you know, a lot can be learned by merging the two together. So meetings, we don't have a lot of meetings, but we do set up on Discord, for example. We moved from Slack to Discord lately, and so now we have a voice channel where people can just drop in and they can talk to each other. They can do screen sharing and all of these things. So we try to make it really easy to have easy meetings, and not to have like scheduled meetings where you have to find a room and then, you know, so you have to spend 2 hours talking about whatever. No, these are all like sort of on demand, sort of almost like if you're at the office, but necessarily without having to annoy people, right? Like, I think that can be efficient, and it's totally optional. Nobody has to go to these unless you really need to communicate with each other. But the most important thing is to allow for productivity. And yeah, I think that's really important. So yeah, I discussed about Notion. So we use Zoom, Discord, GitHub, VS Code in terms of code editor, and Xcode. And when you're gonna hire and when you're gonna have a team, you're gonna notice one thing that is very clear. Some people are very fast and some people are very slow, but they make up for the quality. What you cannot have in your team is someone that is both slow and not good quality. You cannot have that. If you have that, then you're in for some refactoring of the team. So that's one thing I want to say, because I have learned over the years that I cannot have both. You cannot have both. And sometimes you have to just move them to another project because maybe they're not good at that. And that's totally normal. Like, everyone has their weaknesses in terms of what they do, and nobody is good at everything. So if Willie, for example, is not good at creating a game for his course and takes too long, well, maybe he's going to be very good at doing a design in Figma, or maybe he's going to be very good at implementing the UI. If Willie is not good at, let's say, the back end because he doesn't like it and he takes twice as much time as someone else like Dara, then we have to sort of like refactor the team. So the speed or quality is super important. It's something that I have learned so much over the years, because you can have both, by the way, and those are the highly exceptional people in a team, and that's pretty rare, to be honest. We have about 1 or 2 people in a team right now that is like that, but most of the time we have 1 or 2, one or the other, speed or quality. You cannot have none of the two. If you have none of the two, like I said, you have to do something about it. Change the project, fire the person. I haven't fired people. Well, I try not to, but the way that I do about it is I let them choose. Okay, what do you want to do in order to succeed in a team? Like, how can you convince me that you're either fast or you're really, really good at something, right? And so you have to, manage that for sure as a manager. We try to do design and code together. So when we present design, we present to developers. We don't leave them out of the flow, right? So when we present a vision or ideas around a product and why we're making a design this way, we present that to everyone in the team, all the stakeholders, designers, developers, uh, managers, and so on. So that they both understand everything that is at stake, and they understand the decisions that are being made. They're not feeling left out. And yeah, every year we do a team travel to Japan. And why Japan? Well, Japan, we love Japan. So Japan is one of the countries, well, actually the only country that I feel that truly cares in every facet of their lives about quality. Everything they do has to be the best. And that's why it's such an inspiration when you go to Japan. It doesn't matter if it's a food or if it's any industry like manga or anime, or um, even the tools that they have, the products that they have, or the subway system, or the cleanliness of the country, the places, the people, the politeness, everything has to be the best. And whenever we go to Japan, we always learn something. And so we want the team to really sponge that and to really learn from the best in every facet of life. And so I never like to limit, okay, we have to talk about design on only design. No, we have to really think about life as a whole and to apply everything and become one. So yeah, I talk a little bit about my failures, how we pivoted a lot from writing to video. If you look at my first startup, I was about 22 years old, and we had about 50,000 people on the website, but I failed to monetize the traffic. I didn't know how to make money out of it. And I think a lot of people are gonna, a lot of design founders are gonna fail with the monetization, which is why it shouldn't be a dirty word to speak about money, okay? And it shouldn't be a bad thing to monetize your product. And I remember it was worse 10 years ago. It's getting a lot better, but 10 years ago everything was free. Social networks, no ads, nothing. Everything was free. Every product, every UI kit, everything was free. Every YouTube video was free. There was no monetization anywhere. And while that is amazing for starting something, it's not sustainable. And that's what I learned really hard when I had my first startup. Even though I had a hugely successful amount of people coming to my website, I did not know how to monetize it. And as a result, I failed. And I have to move back to my parents' house. And so that was a really, really hard lesson for me. And, I know it's exciting to make that UI kit, to make that plugin, and to make that little website, that iOS app, and give that for free. That's exciting. Or creating a video. But you should, especially if you really love that thing that you're doing right now, if you really love that and if you want to think long term, or that GitHub project, or that GitHub library, how many GitHub libraries are completely dead nowadays because there's no monetization. There's no way you can support multiple years of managing issues and tickets. It takes too much time. You have other things to do. You have to make a living, right? So monetization is not a dirty word, and it is a way for us to sustain over a period of many years, which is why if you look at design code, we have sustained for 6 years and growing every single year for the past 3 years, now $1 million per year in revenue, because I got better at it. I got better at monetization, thinking long term, thinking about the business side of things, right? That's, something that why I love reading about Steve Jobs, for example, because he was so good at turning ideas into sustaining, companies, right? You think about Pixar, you think about Apple, and you think about all of these products such as, the iPod,
all of these crazy ideas that at the time, the iPhone at the time was completely nuts. But someone had to think about this and say, we believe that this is going to change the world. And your product can also change the world, however small that may be. I mean, if you look at my product, it's small compared to Apple, but I'm totally fine with it. And you're changing the world in your spectrum of that, whatever that meaning is for you, right? You don't have to change the world the way Elon Musk does it. You can still change the world the way you do it, because you have to do you. And so it's very important to think about how to sustain that for many years. Um, we had to do so much of that. In terms of life balance, I think this is the last topic, and I know a lot of founders are tired. They hustle so much. They spend 60 hours a week or 80 hours a week, and they think that this is the right thing to do. Now, if you enjoy it, if you're not stressed, go for it. If that's your thing, that's great. But if you have a weakness and you start feeling the pain, the depression, and you feel like something is not right, and you don't have time for your kids, you don't have time for your friends, then you need to balance, right? So it's okay to work 9 to 5. It's okay. Like, you should have 8 hours of sleep. I always have 8 hours of sleep. I never, like, to me, sleep is so important because my mind is clear. I can make the right decisions. When I don't sleep enough, it's hard to receive feedback. It's hard to receive that feedback that says your design sucks, or this thing sucks, this doesn't work. But when you have your 8 hours of sleep, you can take it. And when you can take it, you don't give up. And when you don't give up, you create amazing things, because it takes a lot of iterations to get to where you need to be. So what we try to do at Design Code is, when you hire a lot of early designers and developers, of course, they're going to struggle. Of course, they're not going to fulfill that expectation that you have of them all the time, because you don't have a choice. As a founder, people expect a certain level of quality from my work. So I hire, like, say, early designers, developers, they create a certain work, and I'm like, well, unfortunately, this is not good enough for me. And so it's okay. And you have your sort of like stages of growth. You should not give up, and you should study. Now, the thing that I like to do is, when you're working in your 9 to 5, you focus on things that you're productive with, that you feel a sense of accomplishment. Whether it's answering to customers or creating something that you have done 1,000 times over, like fixing the adaptiveness of this website. But the things that you're struggling with, that maybe you haven't reached there yet, take your time and step back and study in the weekend. And take your time. There's no deadline, but you should study. So when you study, you can come back on Monday and you're like, maybe I want to do more of this in the future, right? Because maybe you're tired of doing support. Maybe you're tired of doing mundane tasks such as debugging. Maybe you want to focus on something that you might not be really good at yet, such as design as a developer, but you don't know how to go about it, right? Study. Don't necessarily do everything in your main work hours. You still need to feel productive in your 9 to 5. But your weekend, study, take your time, do passion projects, and eventually, so you're going to get there. So what we try to do is, we don't tell people to work in the weekend. We just tell them, hey, you want to do more of this design, you want to get better at this, go and study, because that's the only way I can give you more of that work, right?
I can't give you a work you're not good at. Again, based on that rule of speed and quality, if you lack both, I can't give you the work. But if you study and if you practice, eventually you're going to get good at it. Eventually, I can use your work, and my audience with the high expectations can enjoy your work as well. And that is the result of your study. And when you do something better, you can do more of it, and that can become your main job in the future. So that's how we go about it in terms of balance. We try to be flexible in terms of hours. Sometimes it's going to be harder because we have to launch something such as WWDC comes around, the Black Friday, which is a huge event for a lot of startups. Apple launched new iPhones in October. Those are the sprints that are really important to our product. And every single product has different events. But typically, you want to organize your product and your roadmap around those events because they are hugely important and they make a massive difference between something that fails or that succeeds in terms of the content that you create. If you look at a lot of the videos on YouTube, a lot of those videos have a seasonality in which those videos can do better. So for example, a lot of these tech reviewers depend hugely on a product launch by Apple in order to gather millions of views. Outside of that, they have a hard time, which is why you have to sort of build your roadmap around that and take vacation or step back a little bit outside of those sprints. And so, you have to be flexible there. And again, you have to be passion driven to reduce the stress, because when you believe in something, when you love something, you're not stressed by it because it doesn't feel like work. And we try to let people follow whatever they feel really passionate about. Like I said, you have to love difficult tasks. You have to, the difficulty of something should be a feature, not a bug, right? If you look at some of the games, for example, a game like Sekiro or a game like Dark Souls is amazing because it's difficult. And because it's difficult, it's challenging. And because it's challenging, it works on your resilience. It works on your skills, but also on your mindset that allows you to prepare for a lot of things in life, including your work. And so you have to love it. You have to love those things. You have to love because it's difficult. Don't get stressed because it's difficult. Don't give up because it's difficult. Don't tell someone else to do that work because it's difficult. Because if someone else does it, you lose your job, right? That person suddenly has a chance to take your job. Unfortunately, that's the truth. And so, you have to love because it's hard, not because you love necessarily, it has to be hard, but because it's fun that it's hard, right? It has to be fair that it's hard. If you look at a game like Sekiro, it's extremely difficult, but it's fair because, there are techniques involved. And so, you have to understand that it's about solving problems. It's about being fair. It's about following your passion, about doing something you love. And one of the main examples that I can find is having kids. When you have kids, you don't have a choice. They're so difficult. They always require attention, and you can never get prepared for having kids. And when you get through that, you can get through anything in life, which is why enjoy it, like spend the time with them, challenge them and enjoy the journey. So you should always want to help, always want to be optimistic. When you speak in front of people, for example, to get rid of the nervousness, one of the things that I do is to think that you're there to help people, right? You're here to tell people, you know, how to do things that might help them in their life. And so when you take that, you remove the stress and the nervousness, and in return, you focus on what is meaningful. So you have to be an optimistic person. You cannot always, you know, be on the negative side of things, because, you know, life is already as negative as it is. You cannot focus your life on being negative, right? Like, you have to be optimistic. You have to think about solving problems. You know, the whole thing about design is about solving problems. When I got hit by a brick, when my visa got denied, I didn't just say, you know, I'm gonna go back and I'm gonna give up, or I'm gonna do something else. No, I just went and say, let me just travel. You know, let me see what's out there. Let me see if there are other countries that are as good as, you know, the US and San Francisco as a city. Let me see what's out there. Let me experiment, and let's not give up. And most importantly, I want to finish with this, which is to always learn. If you feel that you stop learning, then you will stagnate, unfortunately. And so, you know, if you look at me, I'm almost in my 40s now. I'm always learning every single day. I'm not asking someone to do my YouTube videos. I do my YouTube videos, these live streams. I don't ask someone else to learn Swift UI for me, or to learn the newest platform for React, or libraries and languages and design tools such as Figma. No, I do it myself because I want to always learn. And when I always learn, I know with a high degree of confidence that the future is going to be bright for me and for my team. So that's it. And that's my whole journey. I hope you enjoyed. Sorry if it's been a little bit long. And, you know, I'm going to take some questions. Again, if you really enjoy this video and, you know, this little chat about my journey as a design founder, give us a like, give us a subscribe. That's going to tell me that maybe I should create more videos and get more into the details of how, you know, I went into each of these things, such as product design and hiring process or management. I know I'm kind of like touching lightly on a lot of these topics, but I wanted to give you my whole journey, and I hope you enjoyed it. So I'm going to take some questions, and then we can give it a day. So no, we don't do consultation. So like I said, we are fully focused, and we stopped doing freelancing and consultation because we want to focus on what we love. We do offer student discounts, so you can just send us an email to support@designcode.io with your student ID, and we're happy to give you a student discount. So if you enjoyed this, by the way, and also I would love to hear from the audience which part of this chat that you enjoyed, which part that you felt inspired about. And so maybe I can focus on that in another video. So where are you based? I'm based in Montreal. Grew up in Montreal. I was actually born in Cambodia, and yeah, we were fleeing from the war, and that was, yeah, pretty terrible for my parents and my whole family. So we are immigrants in Canada, thanks to the generosity of people in this country that welcomed us with open arms, and that's what allowed us to be where we are today. So we're incredibly thankful for that. So let's see if I can find questions. All right. I don't think we have a lot of questions, unfortunately. I'm going to look at some of the last comments. Have you set up any automation with the tools that you use? Yes. So this is a really good question, and something that I wanted to talk about. So the process always have to be iterated. And in the first iteration of design code, it was only me. And I started writing everything on an application called Ulysses, where it's not really collaborative and we have to write everything. And then we had to export to HTML. And yes, we have to export to HTML. Yes. So, and then we took that HTML and then we had to write a script and then we had to upload that to MySQL. So MySQL, just a second, I'm almost done, okay? So, yeah, we had to do everything and write a script and put that there. Nowadays, we're using Notion, so that is collaborative, which is not something that we had before. And nowadays we're using Contentful, which is much easier for anyone to upload the content without relying on the script. Because if you create a script that is custom, for example, for an HTML page, then the problem with that is that I cannot delegate that to someone else who might not know about the script. So it's better to use these platforms such as Contentful, such as Notion, that are collaborative, and take that content and delegate. Most importantly, it's not always about the process and how hard the process is, but about delegating to people who might not be familiar with those tools. And so having something like Notion and Contentful allows us to delegate those tasks. Awesome. So looking a lot of great comments. Thank you so much. I'm gonna take a lot of those comments and I'm gonna make sure to take your feedback, and maybe I can discuss more about my experience as a design founder. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening to me for about 2 hours. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you're gonna have a great weekend. I'll see you in the next one on Friday at 3 p.m. Bye-bye.